I Am the Specialist of the Strange, written by Dakota Frandsen, narrated by Douglas MacArthur, published by Bonkers Network LLC. Section 4, Growing Up and Taking Aim, Part 2. Spring 2009. After a few chats with a love interest and a coming to Jesus meeting with one of my uncles, I had decided to move back in with my mother, as Murtaugh was not the place for me. It held answers as to what I needed to do in order to progress. My thoughts centered on finding Olivia's mother, but in order to do so, I needed to try to get answers from my little girl. I knew the possibility of time paradoxes of these attempts and just how likely it was my daughter would know it was well. I had to try. Research on various online forums and radio podcasts revealed several possible methods I could try to make contact, as my previous experiences proved the possibility of latent psychic powers. The method that seemed easiest to work with was automatic writing. For the uninitiated, automatic writing is a form of spiritual channeling that allows for the spirit to take over control of the hands belonging to the channeler and would allow for them to convey messages in writing. I must note that such a process can easily be hijacked by negative beings. Doing such experiments can be highly dangerous, but I was desperate enough for answers. Naturally, my first target was my seemingly time-traveling daughter. Experiments with making contact seemed to be successful, for the most part. Each session I was able to establish it was her and got her to answer a few questions. The question set for the sessions went something along these lines, as it was recovered from an old notebook I dug up. I am looking to make contact with the little girl who saved me. Is this little girl who referred to me as Daddy? Spirit. Yes. Are you actually my daughter?
Yeah.
About when will you be here? 2025. Time travel? This was before aliens were contemplated. Then again, 2024 is supposed to be about when the human-looking ETs reveal themselves. Different sessions alternated between the years 2024 and 2025. What is your name? Olivia. What is your favorite color? Green. Do you have any siblings? Yes. A brother, Michael. I tried to format the questions to get a general idea of my daughter's personality, as well as what the future may have had in store for me. When I finally worked up the courage to ask for Olivia's mother's name, one of two things would happen. Either my head would fill with what sounded like radio interference and I would lose the connection to her, or Olivia would say she wasn't able to reveal that much at the moment. But if I didn't make it clear before, this was not going to be our last encounter. Late fall 2010. Further research on paranormal activity leads to my decision to pursue paranormal investigations. But being I was barely in high school, I had no funding source other than occasional babysitting payments. My family would brush up on me whenever I grew frustrated by constantly having to watch my younger relatives. Paranormal investigation was an expensive hobby, especially at the extent I wanted to take it. So I was forced to wait out for holiday and birthday gifts when babysitting wasn't as fruitful. I started reaching out through social media to others in the field to start studying and getting ideas on how to put together my own team. I was forming the Paranormal Raider Force, something to stick out from the so-called serious investigators. Further notes came from watching the various paranormal shows on television. My main idea was to watch the shows to get ideas for tech and methods, then tinker until I had a fitting practice. It would work rather quickly in my favor, as I used the fact most assumed my age to be almost double what it actually was to my advantage. A local radio DJ outed me, but by then most were impressed enough by what I had built on my own that my age was not a concern. This was comforting in many aspects, as one of the things that motivated my decision to pursue this life, and maybe build a name for myself around it, was the fact that this was about when my father was imprisoned for sexually assaulting my sister, censored. Being that I was around them, I was mostly kept away from the investigation. However, this didn't settle, knowing that my siblings from him were being placed into foster care. My youngest sister at the time, censored, who I had yet to meet, was only 6 months old. My mentality was dirtied enough that the Hatman, as he's dubbed, made an appearance offering to take care of my father for me. Part of it felt like he understood the turmoil in me but I promptly told him to fuck off. This would not be the last of him. April 2010. I met my high school sweetheart. Springtime, halfway through my freshman year, I had met a beautiful girl in class. The class was Touchstones. It was supposed to help kids figure out how to move on to the important milestones we were supposed to reach in our teen to young adult life. Early on in the class, I noticed this shy redhead that usually kept to herself. Her name was Censored. I had tried to think of a way to conveniently bump into Censored. I gave her the name of Chandra in my The Ones Who Walk All World series, so I was able to ignite the flame, but could never patch one together until the teacher of that class assigned us both to the same group for a skit. The skit was supposed to resemble scenarios out of a self-described teen self-help book, meant to teach better ways to react to stressful situations any average Joe could run into on a day-to-day basis. My group was given a skit meant to depict some jackass cutting off someone in traffic, resulting in a wreck. The group was comprised of Censored, myself, and a few classroom idiots. Censored, being shy, stayed separated from the group. As the idiots discussed the skit, I made a point to introduce myself to her to light the flame. She tried to shy away, but I was able to get her to open up. Read the first entries of The Ones Who Walk All Worlds if you want an idea how that conversation turned out. Soon, she would become the first patient I would lose. We got into an altercation when a third member of our group joined, turning the situation into a love triangle. I didn't handle the situation well. She was getting close to someone who was becoming physical abusive towards women, and the very thought churned my stomach. April 23, 2011, Earth, United States, Idaho, Murtaugh. Noted, the first ever investigation as the paranormal raider force took place in the Highway Department building. The initial plan was to look into strange noises that suggested a residual type haunt. Two faces, an old lady screaming, footsteps, and flaring motion sensors. Later we learned that these spirits are very willing to make themselves known. A side case at the time was looking for a toddler that had been seen around some nearby train track wielding a chainsaw, which was believed to show itself in photos as a green orb with feet. Not much time was invested in this phenomena due to the approaching coyotes and the fact right next to the area in which the sighting occurred is a bar. I had finally gathered enough decent equipment to actually hold a well-orchestrated investigation. An offer from my grandfather to check out his place of work came at a convenient time, since I was staying at my grandparents' for the weekend while my mother recovered from surgery. The location was Murtaugh Highway Department, believed to be haunted by former employees and the old foreman of the location. Reports came in to strange smoke, the shop doors rattling without wind or passing semi-trucks, footsteps, and occasional disembodied voices. One of the alleged spirits was my grandfather's old boss, who apparently had kids that went to school with my parents. His cause of death was lung cancer. Same for his wife. Both were heavy smokers in their lifetime. Due to my age at the time, the state of Idaho has a curfew law for anyone under 16. I was accompanied by my grandmother. I was 15 by the time I landed this investigation. I was originally against the idea, noting my grandmother's tendency to try to control a situation, and my desire to keep any and all activities outside of my family's control, which they would do on a few occasions. But in this situation, having my grandmother on board would prove useful. Use screenshot of mysterious face. I published the results of the investigation, with brief case reports, as a YouTube video to help promote business. The case was able to gather strange faces making appearance on a video camera and strange audio recordings. Off-camera was a screaming woman's voices during setup, footsteps moving through the gravel, and voices coming through a radio session. The radio session was an idea to try and replicate results from the infamous ghost boxes without any tinkering. The idea was to simply set an available radio to the lowest possible frequency to make it easier for spirits to communicate. The snag was making sure nothing was coming through on the selected frequency. This location has been the only spot it seemed to work. Through this and a follow-up mentioned below, I have deemed Murtaugh Highway Department as a legitimate haunting site. Spring break, 2011, Earth, United States, Idaho, Twin Falls. During spring break of my freshman year in high school, I was involved in a car accident during my driver's ed class. I was the driver of the vehicle, but was not found at fault. The drive was scheduled to take those of us in my group at the time out into the county and on the freeway. As we came back into town, an old lady tried to dart through 6 lanes of busy traffic. Obviously, as should be indicated by the inclusion of this event, I was the one to strike her. The old lady tried to plead innocence and reason with the officer, but she was the one found at fault in what the cop himself described was much like a failed game of Frogger. On impact, it felt like I was thrown into an astral project, seeing the car crush on the front end as I was rendered unconscious. July 4th, 2011, Earth, United States, Idaho, Sawtooth National Forest, near Diamond Field Jack. My first Sasquatch investigation. As my grandfather continued his battle with cancer, the family decided to take everyone camping rather than doing our usual drive to Wyoming for illegal fireworks, then lighting them off for the 4th of July. One of the locations that was being considered was of interest, as it was the area I spotted a possible Sasquatch years earlier. There is a series of caves near the Magic Mountain ski resort a family of Squatch seemed to reside in. Given the time frame of the appearances and the possible age of the juvenile I was able to encounter, at least 4 specimens are in the region. I received a possible tip earlier that week about Sasquatch dietary preferences to help lure one out from a news video that was circulating depicting a retired forensics analyst utilizing pieces of chocolate to lure a specimen in front of a trail camera. A small ape-like creature approached me from behind as I was setting things up, but quickly bolted when it realized I knew it was there. Its fur was almost black, it was dark out, and the little monster was fast. I didn't have a trail camera at my disposal for this hunt, but I did have soft enough ground to gather a foot casting should I be successful. The second night into the trip, I finally laid the trap but had fallen asleep before any appearance was made. The following morning, I was able to examine the area and successfully extract a foot casting. My estimates show the possible specimen had a foot large enough to fit a man's size 22 shoe, my own foot being a size 18. Unfortunately, years later, the casting was destroyed while moving to a new residence, but I have this photo comparison to show that I did not fake the casting since I was the person with the largest stature and foot size. Comparisons I made with photos from a University of Idaho professor who hunts Bigfoot himself show striking resemblance. I should also note during the entire stay at the campsite, signs of some sort of a larger animal stalking the area were prevalent, but no one was able to confirm exactly what. Conveniently, I was able to catch a radio interview with a show titled Second Sight that had a guest star who was a renowned Bigfoot hunter and was able to gather notes of what to look for to possibly track a Sasquatch, which paired with the news segment I mentioned earlier in this listing, provided valuable insight. A few weeks later, I was able to contact the same guest on the show and was able to relay my story, landing me a guest appearance on his own show called Monster Theater.